The Biden administration is weighing different ways to restrict asylum seekers as Title 42 nears its end. The controversial Trump-era policy requires asylum seekers to remain in Mexico before their hearing. It's expected to end in about 2 weeks, and as our Camilo Montoya-Galvez reports, one plan on the table is a partial asylum ban. It would bar migrants from seeking asylum in the U.S. if they didn't seek protection in other countries. And Camilo joins me now from Washington to discuss. He is our immigration reporter and is all over it. So, Camilo, let's start with an orienting question, which is, how many asylum seekers have been expelled already under Title 42 since the Trump era?
Good evening, John. This could very well be a dramatic shift in U.S. border policy, and this is why. Since March of 2020, when the Trump administration first invoked this public health authority, U.S. border officials have used Title 42 to carry out over 2.4 million expulsions of migrants. And these migrants were swiftly expelled to Mexico or to their home countries on public health grounds, and they were blocked from seeking asylum, John. That is normally something that the U.S. has to do, to consider asylum claims of people who say they are fleeing persecution. Now, the U.S. has relied on this policy for nearly 3 years now, John, especially during the Biden administration, which has faced an unprecedented crisis along the U.S.-Mexico border in terms of the number of migrants and the number of countries that have been affected by this crisis. We're seeing record numbers of Venezuelans, Haitians, Colombians, Nicaraguans, Cubans, and other nationalities journey to the U.S.-Mexico border over the past year. For example, in fiscal year 2022, John, there were about 2.4 million migrant encounters along the U.S.-Mexico border, and just over 1 million of those encounters led to migrants being expelled to Mexico or to their home countries. That just shows, John, how much the Biden administration has relied on this policy to manage migration flows, and now it has 2 weeks, essentially, to end this policy under a court order and to find a better alternative.
And so that's a huge challenge. What happens now if I'm an asylum seeker and Title 42 goes away, I show up, and what happens to me now?
Well, the most important mechanical and legal change that will occur, John, if Title 42 is indeed lifted on December 21st is that all migrants on U.S. soil will be able to request asylum. Since 1980, U.S. law has allowed migrants who have set foot on U.S. soil to request asylum as a way to stop their deportation, even if they entered the U.S. without authorization or illegally. That doesn't mean, John, that everyone is entitled to get asylum. There's a fairly high legal threshold that you have to satisfy, but it does mean that the U.S. has to consider and review all the cases of people who say that they may be tortured or persecuted if they are deported to their home countries or to third countries. So that is something that the Biden administration has to contend with now. It will have to review all of these asylum cases, and right now the asylum system, as we have previously discussed, John, in several occasions, is massively backlogged and fundamentally broken. There are about 2 million pending court cases in the U.S. immigration system. Many of those are asylum requests, and there are fewer than 700 judges adjudicating and reviewing all those cases.
So that means there's going to be a potential increase in the number of just the amount of legal work that needs to be done on the asylum question. Camilo, what happens, though, to somebody who comes to the border with even a legitimate asylum claim? Where do they physically go now, and what kinds of facilities have to be set up if before they were spending time in Mexico while their asylum claims were adjudicated? Just physically, what has to change?
Yes. It depends, John. It's a complicated question. It depends on the migrant's age, their nationality, the sector of the border where they cross. For example, unaccompanied children have to be transferred to the Department of Health and Human Services, and they have been exempted from Title 42 since the Biden administration took office. So this policy change will not affect them. They will still be transferred to shelters inside of the U.S. Most migrant families, with minor children have been released under the Biden administration to continue their asylum cases inside the U.S. We should expect that policy to continue for the time being. The biggest change will come in terms of single adults. For the past 2 years, most single adult migrants, John, have been expelled to Mexico or to their home countries. If Title 42 is lifted, the Biden administration will have to process those migrant adults and will have to surge the number of asylum officers and Border Patrol agents to process them and also set up more facilities to detain them. But again, it all depends on whether the Biden administration decides to detain these adults for the duration of their cases or whether it will release them and allow them to continue their immigration proceedings outside of a detention center.
Both of which are tricky and complicated decisions to make. Camilo, let me ask you then about immigration debates so often. There is this argument that if it is easier to get your asylum claim adjudicated in the United States, that will attract even more people claiming asylum. To the extent that it was less preferable for an asylum seeker to spend time in Mexico, does the fact that they will now either be held in the United States or allowed to be released pending their adjudication of their claim, do officials believe, experts believe, this will increase the number of people applying for asylum in the United States?
Yes, what you're referring to, John, is what administration officials and government officials refer to as a pull factor. It is one of the fundamental dynamics of unauthorized migration, along with push factors being the conditions in home countries that prompt people to journey north to flee their countries. Those can be poverty, violence, and environmental disasters. And then pull factors are the reasons why migrants come to particular places, including the U.S. They could be labor demands, a desire to reunite with family, or, as you mentioned, the perception that there are going to be more welcoming policies under a new administration or after a new policy is terminated, like what could happen on December 21st. So that is a concern that the Biden administration has. That is why they're even considering, John, as you mentioned, reinstating this Trump-era restriction that would bar migrants who do not request asylum on their journey to the U.S. and other countries from being able to request protection here in the U.S. That is how much they are frustrated and concerned about this potential bigger influx of illegal crossings. But again, this potential lifting of Title 42 is not a foregone conclusion. We know that the Justice Department could still appeal this decision, and it has said that it will decide whether to appeal that decision by tomorrow.
Camilo Montoya-Galvez, always with the details. Thank you, Camilo.
Thank you, John.